This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And I'm joined by somebody who is extremely well known in the Quo community. He's been literally everywhere, must have loads of stories, some of which we're going to find out right now. Welcome, Aidan Johnson, to the podcast. Tell me, how did you get into Status Quo?
Well, where do we start? There were, in my music history myself growing up, there were two sort of key moments which I feel changed my life. Start with a corny phrase. The first one was hearing Don't Stop Me Now on Radio 2. It was on a Thursday afternoon, Steve Wright in the afternoon. He played Don't Stop Me Now. So straight away, I was into Queen. Like every household, my parents had the Queen Greatest Hits CD box set thing. So I fell in love with that. That was when I was about 8 years old. And then a year later, I sort of knew I loved music and loved older music. About a year later, I used to get all the free CDs that used to come with the Sunday newspapers. And there'd always be various compilations of, often it was the same tracks, but sort of just with different titles and whatever. There was one called Rockin' All Over the World. It wasn't a Quo CD. It was just a compilation of various rock songs. But the opening track was Rockin' All Over the World. I would love to say it was another Quo song that got me into Quo, but it wasn't. It was that song. It was hearing that, and then I loved it. And yeah, that was that. I can't remember what happened now. I feel like we found a Quo compilation. I think it was like the Essential Quo. Probably got up there. Found the Quo, the Essential Quo sort of 3 CD packet thing in Sainsbury's, I think it was. I can remember a lot of these weird details. And then that was that really. But yeah, I heard Rockin' All Over the World and fell in love with it. And then, sort of enjoyed everything Quo I heard since. So it was that song that got me into Quo. And not even by searching it, just by chance. And then, that was sort of the start of my journey with Quo. I had no idea where it would sort of take me in life, and up to now. Yeah, that was 2007 when I was sort of 9 years old. Fairly long time ago. Probably not quite as long ago as many other Quo fans, but still, it's been a good chunk of my life. Since I was 9 years old. I've been a fan, I've been in awe of near enough everything Quo have done. I've collected everything, I've seen them on most tours, I've been real into them from the word go.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. I wouldn't imagine you're the first person to have got into them from that song. I think once you become a fan and you discover all these other things, I think that's when you say, well, that's the one that got me into it, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, to an extent. I joke about, I wish I'd got into Quo via another song, but in actual fact, I'm not ashamed to say that probably is in my top 5 favorite Quo songs out of, every CD I've got, every Quo album that I know them all relatively well, I like to think. And other favorites would be Jam Side Down and High Flyer, some album tracks or rarer singles, whatever. But Rockin' All Over the World, especially live versions, I still love it. I think it's a great song. I'm annoyed Quo didn't write it, because I'd love for it to have been a real Quo song. But that minor detail aside, no, Rockin' All Over the World still is one of my favorite Quo songs. I love hearing it live. I love it when Andy's organs come in and it builds up, it builds and builds, and it's real great. So yeah, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Many Quo fans, especially back in the 70s, may have been a bit ashamed to say, that we love this song, because I guess it was a change for the band at the time. But no, I love it. I love it.
When would you have seen the band live for the first time?
2008. So sort of the year after I became a fan. The year I sort of got into them, they were playing over Westonbirt Arboretum, which is very close to me, in Wiltshire. But it was a sort of all standing field gig. I think my parents thought, at the age of 9 or 10, whatever, that may not have been enjoyable year, because I was quite short as a child. I didn't really grow up until I was about 14, 15. So they thought, that wouldn't have been a great year. I wouldn't be able to see a lot, etc. So waited until they did the winter tour the following year. And we went to the Colston Hall. My mum took me down. It was a Tuesday, Wednesday. I think Quo were doing 2 nights, and it was the second night. Because what I found funny is when Francis said in his opening talk, he said, "Anyone here last night?" And half the venue said, "Yep," because that was back in the day when Quo did 2 nights at all these little venues, and people would go to both nights. So that was October 2008. Pictures tour, Pictures tour. Because I've got the program and I also got all the Pictures box set. That was quite a good release. I know it's just a compilation, but it was a nice time to be a Quo fan, I think, because I like that. I've always loved that lineup with Matt Letley on drums. They were really rocking at that time. The Pictures thing got massive sort of exposure across all the press and media. It was an enjoyable time to be a Quo fan, seeing Quo do really well and have this massive Pictures tour, which sold really well by all accounts. I just remember being blown away that as if I didn't like them enough already, I adored them even more after that first gig.
Well, they were really on a roll at that point in time. The Pictures tour had a lot of songs in it, I think, that hadn't been played for a long time. I feel like Is There a Better Way was in there. We had things like Ice in the Sun, which they hadn't played since like the late 60s.
Mean Girl and Softer Ride.
Mean Girl and Softer Ride, exactly. How long do you think it took you as a fan to kind of understand all these kind of Quo eras? Because you say you are of the era of Matt Letley on the drums. Me too. How long before you started to understand all the eras?
Oh, that's a very good question. Not for a while, because I did grow up with that era of Quo, and I had the internet back then, but I wasn't so sort of intrigued in searching everything up. Like, I bought the program from that tour, and that program has a bio in of each of the 5 members. So, I knew the name of those 5. If you were to ask me, who Jeff Rich or probably even John Coghlan or Alan Lancaster at that time, I probably wouldn't have known unless I'd seen it on like the sleeve notes of one of the CDs, of their writing credit. It didn't really. Obviously, I wasn't really at all much aware of Quo's history to start with. I didn't know how big they were in the 70s or anything. I'm not quite sure how I then found out about everything, but I've always, certainly from an age, certainly by the time I was in secondary school, from about 2009, 2010, that's when I really started to get into music history. And I'm a bit of a music nerd, not just Quo, but several other bands, the Beatles, the Stones, Rod and the Faces and Elton. So, I just love music history, music culture. So I've got, masses of books there and magazines and things that I just, enjoyed reading throughout my teenage years. And of course, Quo, that was always an interest as well. But I don't know, you just sort of pick it up. But it's a bit like, when I'm talking about it to my parents, they think, oh, how do you learn all of this? But same if I was to talk to my dad about football, not that I do, because I know diddly squat about football, but, he could tell you, who was playing for what X team in the 80s, if you'd, he just knows all of that, because you just sort of you just pick it up. It's just things you pick up. And I guess I've just picked up stuff over the years, but I've always had an interest in it. And you become aware of all the different eras of Quo. And that's, again, why as time's gone on, I've loved them even more, because I've learned how fascinating a career they've had. They haven't taken a 10-year hiatus like other bands. Like, they've always been active, really. I know they had the sort of the breakup and End of the Road, but after End of the Road, they released The Wanderer. And then from that coming out in late 84, it wasn't that much time before they played Live Aid. Then 3 months after Live Aid, they were back in the studio recording In the Army Now. So they've never really had much of a hiatus. There's so many different parts of their career, but it's all continuous. There's never been like a stop. There's never been like, a blank period. And even though they may have had, they lost their way, to quote Francis, in the sort of mid to late 90s, they were still doing stuff. They were still active. There's still so many interesting things about their career, which, you know, I for one enjoy learning. I'm still learning now all the time. I'm understanding all the different parts of their history and finding old press articles. You know, just understanding everything they did, which I find fascinating. Yeah, I'm a bit nerdy about Quo, but it's great. They've got the most interesting career of any band.
I mean, I present a Status Quo fan podcast. I agree with you on that, obviously. You have quite a big history with organising Quo-based events, playing with Quo-based people. When was your first time and how did you get into doing it regularly?
I suppose when I really, you know, got into them and was, you know, was sort of around the stage when social media started to, you know, sort of really explode, sort of, you know, in 2010. And sort of naturally, you know, I was just, you know, sort of in awe of Quo. I wanted to join all the groups that were in existence, and you soon sort of just, you know, get to know people and, you know, see who's about and whatever. And I don't really quite know how it started. So I used to go and see John Coghlan's Quo in Swindon, which is outside Swindon at the Riffs Bar. They used to play there about twice a year. I think I first saw them 2011, 2012. I got a photo of me and John one year, then a photo of me and John the next. And that was obviously when I was going through peak adolescence, let's say. Because I shoot up. I think the first time I'm shorter than John, the second time I'm much taller than him. John Coghlan's Quo. I'm not quite sure why as such, but I invited John to my school because I used to help sort of volunteer the school radio station, just a lunchtime thing. I was part of the radio club. Because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed music and talking, as you can tell. And I just got to know John and Jilly. He came and did that. And then we sort of said about him, because we put on a gig for him. So sort of me and my school band, we played a handful of Quo songs. And then it was sort of said, John, you should come in with your band and play, you know, come back with JCQ. Long story short, that happened that summer in the July. Not long after, you know, John and then did the Frantic Four tour. So he was sort of on a high at that point. And of course, after the second Frantic Four tour. So I did that with him. Then somehow I can't remember what happens next in the story. So I think after I put on that first gig with John, I then wanted to put on something else, like a mini Quo day sort of thing. Just have, you know, 2 or 3 Quo bands on. And one of the bands that I thought that I would sort of really like to get was Rhino's band, which at the time were actually called Woodheads. That was sort of his band that he had around that time. So I inquired with Mike Rhino, who was Rhino's manager, about getting Woodheads for this little Quo thing I was putting on in London, and a couple of the Quo tribute bands, State of Quo. Long story short, that turned sort of it soon evolved after it was booked that, you know, Rhino would be releasing his second solo album, and Mike said, we'd be happy for you to bill this gig, advertise it as Rhino's second album launch party. So that's sort of what the event then turned into, as opposed to sort of like a Quo day. It was a Rhino's Revenge gig, with State of Quo as the opening act. So we had that at the 100 Club in London. That sold out. Mike was booking sort of the rest of a UK and Europe tour for Rhino at the time. And I sort of just helped out with a bit of social media and promotion. And, you know, I wasn't the promoter in the sense I booked the venues apart from the London gig, but I just helped out with a few other bits. I was just involved somehow. I spoke to Mike regularly, then there was sort of talk of doing more gigs. But that didn't, all come off for various reasons. I had that brief stint sort of promoting Rhino and working with him. And then I worked a little bit with Yvonne on the first convention in 2015. I can't remember how I got involved with that or I can't really remember how I first met Yvonne, got involved with that. But I helped do yeah, a bit of the social stuff and, marketing sort of stuff. That's what I was interested in. I was at music college at the time. So I was studying music business. So I had quite an interest in promoting and sort of the operation of music events. But sort of after that, I edged more into, marketing, commercial things. That's what I do now for work. So I sort of moved into that, as an actual job. And sort of once I'd left college, the promoting thing, it was good to do. I enjoyed doing it, especially with Rhino and a couple of Quo tribute bands. But I'm at the time I was quite young. I didn't have my business head screwed on. It was all. I probably sort of rushed into it, went a bit big too soon and whatever. But I have no regrets about anything. But I just thought I didn't want to consistently be a promoter. But anyway, I moved on, started work, had a job and all that. And I guess next is McVention, which has been running for a long time anyway. Jay took it over, I can't remember when, 2015, 16. And again, I sort of hopped on board with him, just helping do a bit of the social, doing sort of email campaigns, just a few of the bits like that. I couldn't go up that year because it's when I'd started my first job. So that's 2016. So I couldn't go up for that. Anyway, that will happen. I didn't really work on anything Quo related then for a couple of years again when McVention 2018 happened. And that I did actually go up to Scotland for. I had sort of the whole week I spent up there. Oh my, I had such a great time. Because again, my involvement before the event was just sort of, I don't know, Jay's sort of, I don't know, he just bounces ideas off me. I generally disagree with them and then he doesn't listen to me. That sort of was the nature of our sort of working together. But what I did was just sort of the digital stuff, digital marketing or a bit of promotion, helping him sell the tickets, etc. I went quite a large time without doing anything Quo related because when I first started working in the summer of 2016, I was sort of busy with my job and I was working 6 days a week. And I sort of, just after I'd left music college, I'd lost interest in the promotion. I just sort of wanted to focus on work, have a career. And then when Rick died later that year, even then initially I'd kind of thought, oh, that's sort of the end of the Quo thing for me. I was one of those to start with. I thought, put that to bed. It was a great time. I still got all the music I can listen to anywhere, but I don't need to go and see them or do stuff or whatever. Anyway, but McVention in 2018 that sort of changed it again for me because it was just such a great weekend. It was really great up in Glasgow. And that's, kind of what got me well and truly back into Quo, the Status Quo, the current lineup, but also all the tribute bands and being sort of on the scene, dare I use that term. Then, since then I've worked on a few other events and things, but I've just enjoyed being part of the Quo family. And
you are a recognizable face. Certainly, if I hadn't heard of you before the convention last year, I certainly would have afterwards, because you performed on stage like 2 or 3 times with several different bands. It's interesting. I mean, how did you come to, sit on the drums with a band?
So I did a few gigs with John Coghlan Square last year. So like I said, I promoted them back in 2014 at my school hall. I sort of knew John and Jilly. I knew Mick Hughes, who I love. He's fantastic. And so I've sort of known him sporadically and seen him at gigs, over the years. And of course, after the pandemic, they sort of relaunched the format of JCQ for his the farewell tour, which involved having Russ on drums for some of the set and John on drums and the acoustic set and whatever. But there were a few of the gigs they had sort of come in that Russ couldn't do because he's a drummer, he's a technician. He's got various other things on anyway. So Mick sort of rung me up out of the blue early last year and just said, we've got these 3 gigs. Would you like to, stand in for us, standing in for John sort of thing? And I didn't have to think about it. I said, yes, of course. I'd love to be doing that. I did the 3 gigs with them. That was great. Then at the convention, I was up on stage with the piano because actually at the gig at my school hall in 2014, I played keys with them then. on Matchstick Men and Rockin' All Over the World. So yeah, I did the same at the convention last year because Mick asked me to. And of course, why not? I'd love to play the finale number with John Coghlan's Quo at their last ever gig. Of course, it's an honor. And then also with Big Fat Mama, so me and Jay got them over from McVention year before last. Sort of right. It was very hit and miss whether it happened because it was still just at the end of COVID and Scotland had different restrictions to England, and then of course they're from mainland Europe, from Sweden. So it's all these different restrictions, and it was quite hard to get them over. We got them over. They put on a awesome show, really, really good. And then I think so I was actually John Coghlan's Quo were playing the following night in McVention. And I got up on keys with them then for Rockin' All Over the World. Big Fat Mama saw, and then somewhere along the line, Johan asked me if I'd be interested in playing with Big Fat Mama at Butlins last year, which I did. Things just come together, and when you're sort of on the scene, I'm very, I want to use a more interesting word than social, but I'm always happy to talk to people, get to know people, stay in touch with people, and if people ever ask me, I've never begged to do something. I've never begged, please can I come up and play piano with you? Yeah, I've never done that. I just keep in touch with people, and obviously I put some videos up online of me playing here in my studio at home. But I've just been very fortunate to be within I'll use the term again, the Quo family. And certain opportunities have arisen, and it's always great fun. Why wouldn't I? I play music a lot in various bands, but it's not all Quo. I do all sorts of music, half of which I couldn't give less of a shit about, really, because it's all the weddings I play and all to drunk people doing Mr. Brightside. I don't care about that. But any chance as a musician, any chance to play Quo, it's an honor, especially with such great bands like John Coghlan's Quo and Big Fat Mama. It's great.
And now we come to Break the Rules, of course, which is your tribute band that you started with what some Quo fans would call the young contingent, which it's quite amazing, actually, because when I went to the convention last year, there are people there that are like 5-10 years younger than me. I'm 33, and I felt old compared to a lot of these people that are really like established musicians. And a group of you have got together and created this band called Break the Rules. Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice. Sort of so the other great thing about Quo, before I get into Break the Rules, is the friends that I've made through it, and the sort of the community of fans. So Jay, I think, was actually one of the first young Quo fans that I met, not in person, but online. We used to talk all the time. I can't remember when we actually first met in person. I don't know if it was around the Frantic 4 gigs. We'd already been talking a couple of years. And we were actually born 2 days apart. So he was born on the 9th of May, 98. I was born on the 11th of May, 98. So I've given away our dates of birth. He won't mind. So I've just built up so many more friends, mainly through social media. And then we've met at gigs, not necessarily gone to gigs together, but just met up at gigs. Also Adam B, I've been to loads of Quo gigs with. He's sort of my road trip buddy. And then, I got to know Dan Loveridge, and Lewis. Lewis is just everywhere. Again, I can't remember where I first met him, probably at a Quo gig 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, I think 2018. So we sort of all knew of each other. And then Dan asked me to be a drummer for a gig. So he's got a covers band called Lock the Doors. They were asked to do sort of a private gig, a birthday event. He wanted me to be the drummer. And I said, yeah, why not? I'd like to, because I'd always seen his videos. I'd always admired him as a musician. And I thought it'd be nice to play with him, and, we might do a couple of Quo songs or whatever. And we went to the rehearsal rooms, and so the other guitarist, the Rick guitarist, let's say, Ryan, is Dan's best mate from school. Ryan I had met before, but only very briefly. He's a huge Quo fan, but he's not quite as active, on all the social platforms as I am. So I didn't sort of know him. But anyway, we went in with a list of songs, with, some Robbie Williams and Killers and Bryan Adams and one Quo song. And then we ended up spending 3 hours jamming out Quo. So yeah, we got nothing prepared for the private party we were booked for, but we just jammed out Quo. And because they, again, both great guitarists, and they know Quo's back catalogue, really well. They can sort of just play it or not make it up, but they know it. Yeah, they used to sit in the music room at school playing those songs together when they were sort of 13, 14 years old on guitar. So it was great just to jam with them, because at this point I'd guested with Heavy Traffic once. I got up and played 2 or 3 songs with them, 3 songs in an encore gig in Bristol. But besides from that, I'd never played much Quo on drums. In my main band, my function band, we've only ever played Rockin' All Over the World. But to play it with 2 guitarists who really know it and get it felt good. It felt good. So then we knew Lewis was a bassist, a very good bassist, and a big Quo fan. So I think we sort of, I don't know whether we asked him because we wanted a Quo bassist. I mean, we did need a bassist for the sort of this Lock the Doors band anyway, for the generic covers band. But I think Lewis was sort of more appealing because he was a Quo fan, and we thought, oh, well, he may be able to come along and, sort of add some bass to our Quo jam next time. So we asked him along. And of course, yeah, he gets it. He's a really good bassist. He's got the same groove in his right hand as Alan Lancaster. He gets that as a bassist. He doesn't just play the notes. And again, a lot of the time he knows the music. The songs he's been listening to, for since he was, a young lad like the rest of us. So it kind of just accidentally fell into place. We did, of course, rehearse for this other private party that we had, and did all our, cover songs, but we spent a lot of time jamming out Quo. And then I want to say it was Dan really who thought, we could, this is, gig worthy. This is giggable. I like that word, giggable. So he suggested about, we should do something. And of course I was well on board. Like, yeah, being a Quo tribute, like, and it wasn't just going to be in a Quo tribute. Like, by this point, we'd had a few jam sessions. We'd been on, to a few Quo gigs together on the Out Quo tour. We'd spent a lot of time together, just becoming really good mates. So I think that, with the combination of we all love Quo and we all enjoy playing together, it felt like a great idea. So yeah, we did that, and then we had our first gig back in March, which went pretty well, I do believe, and we loved it. And yeah, we're going to do a few more. Yeah, we've got a couple more in this year. We'll have a few next year. And we're all in other bands. We all do other things as musicians. So for us, it's just a side project, but it's something we care about. That's not to say we're ever going to go out and do a gig, half-assed or unrehearsed. Like, we're putting the hours into the rehearsing for whatever gigs we do have. But yeah, we love it. I really love it, actually. I really enjoy it. I wouldn't want to be doing it with any other people than those 3. Because we do genuinely click as people and as musicians. Dan's a great frontman. I've played with I've stood in with a lot of different function bands, and he's a really great frontman. He's got this sort of driving guitar, which really, he starts something. Often the first song we do is just Spinning Wheel Blues, and he starts that da, 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 and then he, when he gets the solo in, that really drives me along. So I like having him there. Ryan he's a superb musician, so he just gets music. He's great at harmonies. He's great at, he speaks a very good musical language. That's how I see him. Then Lewis, he's just got the energy, the way how he bounces around physically, and he's got the groove in his bass, and it really does click. And I like to make that clear. We're not just 4 musicians who happen to like Quo and can all play Quo. We, that may make for an okay band, but the 4 of us genuinely do click, and, we're all really good friends. And yeah, I love those guys, and I like being on a stage with people like that. It's special. So Yeah, it's all worked out quite well. I've spoke a long time there on a band that have only played one gig. We've got a short history. Yeah, I've managed to talk for about 5 minutes on one topic.
It shows you're passionate about it.
Yes,
and
I like that. I'll go with that. I'll run with that.
I looked down the set list for it, and it was a real like eclectic mix. And I wondered actually, like, how did you go about deciding? Because obviously, you know, given your ages, you may favour the later, you know, band set list. I know a lot of bands go for like the just doing it era of Quo in their set list, but you had literally everything in there.
Yeah, well, we never wanted to be, you know, just too frantic for or just too we never sort of set ourselves to sound like a certain era, because you know, even when I play songs, some songs I play like John, some songs I play like Matt, then a couple of songs like Little Lady I play like Jeff. You know, because I've watched so many videos and listened to them all so many times, so we don't try and sound like one specific era. And then when it came to set lists, like we knew. We haven't got a name for ourselves as a Quo tribute where we could go out and just play, you know, rarer songs, album tracks. We knew we had to do all the hits. So all the hits are in there. Some, well, not all of them, but there are a lot of hits in there somewhere. So sort of once you've laid out that, and if we're going to do 2 1-hour sets or 1 hour, then an hour and 10 or an encore, whatever, like we sort of knew how many gaps we had. And then I think before we decided the set list, we'd already jammed out a lot of songs anyway. Like, you know, we used to jam out things like My Little Heartbreaker from In Search of the Fourth Chord. Like, yeah, because that's just a song that we know. We just jammed it out. That was never to say that we were going to play it live. But yeah, we just jammed out a lot of songs. And I think it was just important that we got a mix across the eras, really. You know, I don't want to take credit for it. Sorry to Dan, Ryan, and Lewis. I put together the bulk of the set list simply because I've seen a lot of other Quo tribute bands. I know what everyone does. I know what songs go down well. I know what bands do well, what they don't do so well. I knew what we'd be able to do well. I knew what other Quo fans may go away saying to their Quo friends, oh, they break the rules. They did a really great version of, I don't know, All Stand Up, you know, because not loads of bands do that. Or I can't remember what else we did that was a bit niche, but whatever it may have been. So I just wanted to give it like all we really want to do. I don't think I've ever heard a band do that. So I really wanted to do that. And I think we did it quite well. But that's what I've always liked about Heavy Traffic as well, because I've heard them do so many, you know, these great songs that no other band would ever think of doing, like Thinking of You and 20 Wild Horses. And for me, that's why I walk away from a gig. Oh, Heavy Traffic, they played a great version of Thinking of You. Because if no other band are doing it, that gets you talking, then I'm telling everyone that. Now, to a lot of the older Quo fans, a Quo tribute doing a great version of Thinking of You, or all you really want to do, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot. But I don't know. So, yeah. In short, we had to have the hits in there. We wanted to have all eras, and we also wanted to have a little bit of a talking point, or just something that we might have done differently, or that we really thought we could give a great edge to that wasn't already being done on the Quo scene. But that's very hard because you've already got such a wide range of great bands around. So, yeah.
I mean, this is going to sound weird, but you've got a Bula Quo poster behind you.
Yes.
Do you knock out your version of Fiji Time at any point during any of your rehearsals?
We've joked about. I had a message from Reese from Heavy Traffic, always talking anyway, and he was asking about, this is before the Break the Rules gig, and he's asking about our set list. And I just sent through a set list just as a laugh, like Fiji Time, Looking Out for Caroline, there's going to be like Dreaming, Margarita Time, and Address Book. And I just sort of wrote, yeah, these are the great rocking songs we're going to do, just to the laugh. No, we've never jammed out anything from Bula Quo. No, I've only got that poster. I got given it by Stuart, the director, Stuart St. Paul, and it's signed by Rick Francis, Laura Aikman. Yeah, that's only why I've got it up. It's not because I'm a massive fan, but I do like that album to an extent. All right, it may not be the perfect album for Quo, but I like the production. I think that is Mike Paxman's best work. He did a great job on Quid Pro Quo, but I don't dislike the Bula Quo album. But no, none of the songs are really hits, so none of them would go well in front of a Quo crowd. So unless we really enjoyed playing them, we're never really going to add them in, are we? That's the truth.
Well,
we'd like to maybe give Go 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 a go, but yeah.
well, looking out for Caroline, Quo kind of jumped the shark with that one. So we can move swiftly on. What did you think of the Aquostic stuff?
First album I loved. Second album I hated, despised. You've got me started on a rant now. No, the first album I really liked. I thought it was a good idea. I thought, Quo were very contrasting. They did the first Frantic 4 tour 2013, then went and did Bula Quo. Talk about different, talking about flipping the coin. And then to the next year, they did the second Frantic 4 tour, and then they did the Aquostic album. Again, diverse, different. They're keeping us on our toes, whether we like it or not. At least they're doing something different to an extent. First Aquostic album I thought was really good. I was at the Roundhouse gig, the Radio 2 gig, which was great. Because I've always been a bit of a TV and radio nerd, so just seeing all the cameras set up and seeing Joe Wiley and Jeff Smith from the BBC was doing his intro, and it was all just it was great. But it was a real great gig. The atmosphere was great, and I'm glad that it was on DVD, CD. Then the second album, I don't know what went wrong for them. I don't know what Mike Paxman was doing. It sounds awful. I don't want to be mean to him because he's always been great producing Quo, but I don't know what he did to the drums and just to everything. The vocals. I know Francis has made comments about the state of Rick's vocals. Which I won't go into those reasons, but no, I just didn't like the second album. The song choices, the arrangements, the sound, none of the vocals sounded that good, to be honest. And it was just a bit of a flop. And I remember even Chris Evans on Radio 2, he didn't like it either. And he is a Quo fan. He's always been quite nice about Quo. Even he was laughing about it, and that hurts. I don't like it when people. I think the Hold You Back from the second album that was released as a single.
With the Christmas bells on it.
Yeah, with the Christmas bells, right? Then Chris Evans went on a massive rant about how can you call something a Christmas song if you just call it Christmas bell? Yeah, if you just put bells on it. And he was also on about it's not even a good arrangement anyway. And then he had a bit of a dig at Quo, which I don't like hearing because as a Quo fan, like there's nothing better when people are. And to be fair, since Chris does go on, he does have Quo mornings on Virgin Radio sometimes. We'll hear play Quo for half an hour, which is which is good. But he is a Quo fan. He's not anti-Quo. But if even him and the travel presenter and the sports chap think that this is all a bit crap, that's not nice to hear. But I did agree with them. That's the truth.
Well, it's a bit up and down sometimes with those releases, and certainly in the 2010s, there were so many releases. You're absolutely right. Frantic 4 followed by Bula Quo. I mean, I can't help but listen to the song Bula Quo and that line, I came here to this island, and it's something like talking about another show or something, and I always change it to talking about Hammersmith because, Frantic 4 previous. And then obviously the second one, like you say, followed by Aquostic, then another Aquostic. I actually thought the second one was better, more creative.
Okay.
But that's to balance it up slightly. And then a couple of years later, after Rick passed away, we had his solo album, which was a masterpiece, really, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it sort of took us by surprise because there were so many rumors, and there's always a lot of Quo fans online who think they know it all. And some were saying, oh no, nothing was ever recorded. Rick just wrote some songs. Other people were saying, oh, we just did demos. Other people were saying, oh yeah, he did a whole album. We didn't expect anything. I don't know, until the announcement was made by Ear Music and that press release come out about pre-orders and release of the album. Like, I didn't think it was going to be happening, to be honest. And I don't think Mick Jr. had made like a specific statement saying we're working on Dad's new album, not until the announcement was made anyway. But when it came out, I really liked it. It was, it sounded a lot like Quo. Of course, it was only, Rick on it from Quo. Well, I think Rhino contributed a little bit on a couple of the tracks, perhaps. But it felt like a Quo album, but it had the balance of everything. It wasn't just, I love Quid Pro Quo, but perhaps it is a little bit all to the same fast tempo, rocky sort of thing. It hasn't got the balance. Whereas Over and Out encompasses everything that a Quo album should or has done, in the past. It's sort of, got the country-esque songs. It's of course got the Rick's classic sort of, heavy playing style. It's got slightly more ballady kind of song. It's got sort of your light-hearted, shuffly ding da da ding. Sort of Everybody Knows How to Fly. I think that song is that I'm thinking of. It's just got a bit of everything on. But no, I really liked it, and the production was great. Joe Webb did a really good job. I think it was just how Quo should have sounded in this day and age. I would love, for Joe Webb to produce Backbone, really. But anyway, that's another matter.
I think that's divides people. I think I've heard comments about the drums. In fact, I feel like I asked Andy Brooke about the drums, and you can go and listen to the podcast with him to find his answer. But you are right. That was a bolt out of the blue. Had no idea. He'd recorded 9 songs at least, because Halloween was just a remix, I think, of the 1985 session that he did. Yeah. Do you think that his first solo album, or the unreleased one, will ever see the light of day in any form?
No, because there's not really much on there that we haven't already heard, because a lot of it was all B-sides for Quo. I think I'm right in saying, I don't know, it's not, none of them were songs that stand out, but I liked Don't Give It Up. Don't give it up, the brass sounds.
Don't give it up. Exactly.
Yeah, I like that song. But I think a lot of it was, was sort of has already been out there. It's Quo B-sides. Then Without You was a song that was recorded for recorded delivery, wasn't it? It was called something different. But yeah, I'm not too... I feel like, that if the album wouldn't sound enough like how Rick would have wanted it to, let's be honest, he was recording the album at a time when he was probably a bit lost. It was probably a bit sort of trying to, I want to be really 80s. I want to try and, I want to try and be back in the charts amongst whoever else, who he was sort of out in the clubs in London with then. He sort of wanted to do sort of something poppy, but still rocky, a bit Def Leppard-y mixed with New Romantic. I think that's sort of the vibe I get from what I've heard from Matt then. And no, I don't think it would be good for his legacy if that were to come out now. Not saying, write it off, because it's part of his history. I'm never, a fan of, let's just forget about that. No, it's part of, their history, or Quo's history, or whatever it may be. But no, I don't think there's any need to see some sort of, 40th anniversary edition of Recorded Delivery. The album that never was. Thank God.
Well, there's a couple of songs on there that never saw the light of day on any releases. Show Me the Way, and there is another one. I think it's Only Love Can Break Your Heart, I feel is the title of that one. Earlier, you make reference to different drumming styles. Can you elaborate the difference between the different drumming styles of the different Quo drummers?
Yeah, I can try. Obviously, John, as far as we're concerned, he played on the majority of the hits. He was part of Quo 70s sound, and he always will be the original Quo drummer. He was very good at the shuffle and the four to the floor, which he played on not just the shuffle songs, but also a lot of the straight songs. It was all four to the floor. So like Caroline, four to the floor, boom, boom, all the way through. So when I play that with Break the Rules, I play it four to the floor. Next weekend, I'm playing with the Quo Experience. Caroline, I'll play that like Matt, because they, are obviously a tribute to sort of the Matt. They had Matt Letley play with them for a while. a few years back. So, I will play it like that. So it won't be 4 to the 4, it'll be boom, 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 because that's how Matt used to play it. And it fits that sort of style as well. It's slightly, probably a bit faster, a bit smoother, not quite as in your face, a little bit more reined in. But that's how Matt played. It's not to say he lacked in power. But he was groovy. He grooved along. He wasn't. John's drumming is very sort of, in your face and sort of sturdy, solid as a rock, but not as much light and shade. Yeah, Matt really, when he needed to, he could sit back. When he needed to go in, he'd go in. That's what I love about Matt. I mean, Pete, there's not really much to say about him. He came in, did a job, did it very well for what he needed to do. It's no easy feat. I think he was a good drummer from what I saw, but I've got no strong feelings about him. There was obviously a lot with John's. Pete was more of a generic sort of rock pop drummer, I think. Like the way how he plays Quo songs, he played them fine, but he certainly didn't have the real sturdiness that John's drumming had. But Pete was still great for that period. Then Jeff come in, and I think he was perfect for Quo at that time. I mean, so was Rhino, and Francis has said, and I'm sure Rick has in interviews, like, they gave them both the right kick up the arse. If you look at End of the Road, like, I know Francis and Rick are probably off their heads on whatever substances, but is a bit more chill. But you look at them sort of, in 86, 87 and onwards, like they're going for it because they have to. Because, Rhino and Jeff have come in and given them this right kick up the arse with power and tightness. And, because Rhino and Jeff are two musicians who before Quo had played with several other bands. They were professional session musicians, I guess they were, or professional musicians, let's say. But Jeff, incredibly powerful. I think it was perfect for Quo at the time, especially in the studio. All his drumming on record I really like. He did what he needed to do to complement those songs the best they could be, especially with some of the songs perhaps not being Quo's strongest. I still feel like that's never been down to Jeff's drumming. I know Jeff didn't perhaps have much input on songwriting, but I think he did the job great. Lots of people say about him in the tempo. At times, perhaps a little rushed, but the way how I see it, I've said this to many people before. I feel like if throughout the 90s, if he hadn't been pushing Rick and Francis as hard as he was, they would have struggled more as they got into older age, into their 50s in the 21st century. It's because they went their entire 40s, in the 90s, being pushed at 110 miles an hour by Jeff, which made them still have the power to do it. If they started to slip and slow down sort of in the early 90s, there's no way they would have been able to keep the pace up come 2010. So that's my sort of praise for Jeff in the tempo. If you're going to look at it in positive light, be it that he kept the whole band, even Andrew as well, like when he's got to do the solo on paper, playing the da, he does that on the keyboards. Got to do it fast with Jeff. Everything's got to be fast, not too fast. It's not too fast, but I'm just saying it's that extra few BPM which I feel kept Quo alive. But if I wasn't around then, I was 2 when Jeff left. But if I was, the age I am now back then, and Jeff left, I don't think I would have been too gutted, because I feel like by the end of the 90s, Quo had lost their edge, they'd lost their groove. And then, Matt come in and, this isn't just opinion. There are interviews online that you can read. I feel like it's is it the Swedish fan club magazine that Ollie runs? They've got a couple of interviews and there's quotes in there. They ask about Matt. They asked Rick and Francis about Matt, and they said that Matt's taken us to the next level, and they're raving about him. And this was sort of Heavy Traffic era, perhaps just before. And they were saying he really did take them to the next level, which he did. You look at that Quo gig, 2002, the TV performances they did for Heavy Traffic and that album promo, they're sounding great. They're sounding better than I think they ever did. And again, there's another interview I watched recently where Rick said he thinks they're playing better than they ever have, and that was the late 2000s, I think. So I do think the drummers have had a lot of impact on how Quo have played overall.
Well, like you say, Quo managed, unlike other bands, they just went straight through these decades and managed to reinvent themselves. And it is astonishing. I don't know of many bands who've just gone straight through without taking, a 5-year break or something. Why is it you think that they get absolutely trashed sometimes by music press, by critics, by just the general public?
Well, they were always trashed a lot back in the 70s when they were at their peak. If you think, when Quo at their very best was supposedly sort of at their, the peak of when they were probably the coolest, they were still sort of trashed for being uncool by the press back then. I mean, a lot of it, Quo never really fitted in. They were a league of their own. And I think, when you look at glam, people think Quo, the only band that I would say were Quo's contemporaries a little bit were the Faces, Rod Stewart and the Faces. People think, I mean, this is just my opinion, of course, but Quo's contemporaries, I wouldn't say, obviously aren't the Stones or the Who or the Beatles, because that was all before Quo, really. I know they were still going, but not, there was those few years older, and I think different music, especially the Who, when they evolved into doing, Pete Townsend rock operas, totally different. Glam rock, I don't see Quo the same way as I see Slade, Sweet, or Mud, or any of that. As much as I love Slade and I really like Sweet, I don't see Quo in that category. Queen also in their own category, but then sort of the rest of glam rock, like sort of late Rod After Faces, Bowie, T-Rex, Elton. I don't feel like Quo were part of any of those tribes in the 70s. They were their own thing. And they sort of always had been. Then you get into the later 70s, obviously Quo weren't anything to do with punk or disco. The 80s, they weren't anything to do with new romantics or new wave, or then sort of the emergence of your heavier rock, where AC/DC or Iron Maiden, Metallica, Ozzy Osbourne, or sort of the more commercialized American rock, your Def Leppard, a British band, but they're kind of very American, let's say. Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith. Quo have never fitted into any of these slots with any other band. I don't think. They've always been very individual. There's never been a state, and even in the modern age, there's never ever been, the only band who I would say in the last 20 years that are sort of potentially similar to Quo are McFly, because they sort of have, that, I don't know, they have these good sort of pop rock songs. They are sort of a rock band live, maybe a bit more poppy on record, but they're sort of just a good feel-good band. They're not going to change the earth with their songs, but they just go out and they gig, they give people a good time. I feel like McFly's ethos is, similar to Quo's in that respect. But no, I mean, Quo, they've just never fitted into anything, and they've always been an easy target, haven't they? Because of the whole 3-chord thing, or just sort of, Francis and Mick always doing their move and whatever. They're an easy target, but they've not ever taken it too badly, have they? Or maybe they have, but not to the extent that they've thought. To my knowledge, they've never done anything with the press have moaned about doing that, so we're going to do this. There's one time I think Francis and Rick didn't want to do interviews together because they were sort of seen as a bit of a double act. The sort of Morecambe and Wise of rock, which I get, which they were, and they still sort of, up until Rick's passing, they certainly were. But besides from that, I don't think they've ever, sort of gone away and sobbed at anything the press or the music critics have said about them.
No, pretty much just straight through. I mean, the other day I listened to the Steve Wright interview they did in 1989 with the acoustic session in it, which is great fun. You wonder what's going on. I mean, I haven't heard too much like peak Steve Wright, but I can imagine every show was like that. It isn't just Rick and Francis, but the fact is that is one of their low periods, and yet they're still being invited onto peak time, national radio on one of the biggest radio stations in the country. And that's pretty much what happened, even during Don't Stop, which to fans, isn't always highly regarded, but they're on national television.
Number 2 album.
Yeah, exactly. Huge thing. Anniversary Waltz has every opportunity to be slated, yet they're on top of the pops, at 7:30 with the likes of all the dance acts that were around at that time, just absolutely defying every convention.
They're the definition of sort of an enduring rock band, because they have endured everything. And even though the Stones were still releasing original albums in the 90s, but none of them were that big hits. I've got the Bridges to Babylon and Voodoo Lounge. They're not bad albums, but there's no real sort of big hits or nothing that ever charted that much off it. They're not, I'm not saying they're weak albums, but they're fine. And the same really could be said about Quo's albums. I don't think they were ever that dire, but they did kind of do well, with the exception of perhaps Perfect Remedy and Thirsty Work. Anniversary Waltz did extremely well. Don't Stop did phenomenally well. That was a mega thing for Quo. But they've just always been there, like you say, on TV, every TV show. They've just always been there. And they've never got, certainly since the 70s, they've never got that massively big that they've got too arrogant or sort of like, because the Rolling Stones asked them to go and mime to their new song, they'd be like, no. Ask Elton to go and mime to his new song, they'd be like, fuck off, like they're just not. I feel like a lot of those bigger acts wouldn't do that, but Quo, oh, do you want to go on, can we get you on, with Gloria Honeyfoot at 3:00 in the afternoon, miming to a new song? They're like, they just do it. But that's how they've just always been ever present. And even if the people enjoying their music haven't always been the Quo fans, that's fine. There may be other people who at the time bought Don't Stop and thought it was a great album. They may not have necessarily bought Quo album before, but it's because they saw Quo and the Beach Boys on Surprise, Surprise with Cilla Black that they thought, oh, we like that version of Fun Fun Fun, we're going to buy the album. Then they may have really liked it. So it does, Quo's sort of endurance is very, very admirable, because they have grafted, they have put the effort in. I don't think they've ever sat back and thought, we'll just let this ride. Just push the album over the edge and see what it does. I think Rick felt a little bit like that with Bula Quo. And there's an interview where he says, let's just let it slide away, sort of peacefully let it, slide away. But aside from that, they've done everything they've needed to, and that's how kept them in the public eye. Like, there were bands that are so much bigger and so much more successful, yet, like, but you wouldn't know the names. Like Coldplay, I couldn't name another member apart from Chris Martin. Yeah, they're the biggest band in the world. They've got the biggest stadium tour ever. Same with who else? Depeche Mode and The Cure. All these, I know there may be slightly more indie bands, but they're still not as well known or have the number of hits or have the recognizable frontmen. I know it's just Francis, but when it was the partnership of Rossi Parfitt, no other band really has that besides from Stones, Beatles, Queen. So that's where Quo are in that elite. They are the household names for sure. I can't remember what the question was or where we started off with this, but you got me going on the roll.
This is what happens in this podcast. This is why I love it. But we shall bring this to a close. What's next for you? What are you working on next?
So this weekend, I'm rehearsing with the Quo Experience. We have our first gig. Well, I have my first gig with them next weekend, next Saturday. So that's in Bury St. I say next Saturday, 1st of July, depending on when this goes out, before or after. And then I've got one more gig with them in August. Break the Rules are playing a festival in August. Then we've got the Rock Till You Drop Day, end of August. Then we have another gig near Oxford, end of the year. I'm not really working much on McVention this year because I've been too busy and not done a lot with it. But I still speak to Jay. I'm going up to that in October. And yeah, that's about it really. Next year, see what happens with Break the Rules gigs. And yeah, I don't really know. I've not got anything too much in the pipeline really. But of course, when the rumours are out there that Quo are doing a tour next year and they're doing the festivals, they're just touring in the summer, which I love. I cannot wait to be back out at the festivals, vlogging at the festival. That's going to be good fun. All the outdoor gigs, I adore them. And it's nice to have, I like the freedom. I don't like the being stuck in a seat in a concert hall sort of thing. I like the field as long as it's not chucking it down with rain. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that next year and more vlogging, of course. But yeah, all good times. Yeah, I'm all about keeping the Quo music and the legacy alive in any way possible.
We'll do some more vlogging anyway, because, the first time I saw that was like, wow, this is really well done, really gives a sense of the day, and actually made me step up my game. Was like, hey, I need to get into this video thing, because your editing on those things is impeccable.
It's kind of you to say. I studied digital marketing a bit. Yeah, I'd done lots of video editing for work, so I sort of knew how to do it. But I just wanted, it wasn't about filming Quo and whatever and getting people to say, look how good they are live. It was about people, all my work colleagues, former work colleagues and friends back home, family. They don't know what I do when I go off and see Quo. They might see the odd Instagram story or Facebook post. They don't really know what I get up to. So I wanted to show them how much fun we actually have. And I'm always on about all these people, Ben, Dan, Adam, Lewis. And, my mum's like, has no idea who they are. And so it's sort of more, these are all like my best mates. And like we go out and have the most amazing time, in all the bars before Quo. We all gravitate towards, wherever Quo are playing. All the Quo fans meet up and we all have a great laugh together. And then we go in, enjoy the gig, and then go back to the pub afterwards. It's that whole, it's trying to really convey what the Quo fan community is about. And I think I did an okay job at getting that across in the vlog. So that was my aim more than anything. But no, I enjoyed making them, and I look forward to making more when the good times happen.
Well, I know that when you did the convention, you stopped about halfway through, and I can completely understand that, because I started doing that and then was like, no, do you know what? I'm just going to enjoy this. And from what I could see, you were enjoying it. So,
Yeah. What were you doing? Were you doing a bit of recording there for the podcast?
A little bit, yeah. I did some interviews, and initially I was going to do like you, basically in audio form. I recorded in the car on the way to the train station and stuff like that. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It just didn't pan out, because you end up, getting caught up in the atmosphere of those events.
Yeah, once you just sort of get there, and I did a bit. You watch the vlog. I did bits, and then it is hard work to capture it all. Last year I did 7 Quo gigs overall, 5 on the first tour, 2 on the last, and I only vlogged 3 of them because that's all I could be bothered to do. Like, I just wanted to enjoy the other gigs. It's so I shouldn't make out that it's hard work. It's not hard work, but you just want to enjoy an event. Like, you really do need to soak it in. As much as the vlogs are great to look back on, didn't we have a great time? I'm fortunate that I can remember that I had a great time. Maybe a little bit intoxicated with alcohol, but I can still remember it well enough that I know I had a good time. I don't need a vlog sat there on YouTube to tell me that I had a good time, or the great people I was with. We can all remember it. Just...
Well, keep on quoing, and
you too.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aidan, for appearing on the podcast today. Please do come back.
Oh, I'd love to, Jamie. Thank you, and thank you for running the podcast as well. It's great.